There is a condition shared by thousands of well-meaning, hard-working students all across the country. A pervasive condition in which students, unbeknownst to them, tell people they're in the wrong major. Okay, some of you know where this is going. If you've been around for a while, you may have heard a version of this rant coming from one of your favorite professors a time or two in the past. But chances are, most of you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, especially if you're relatively new to the major. But it's not just pointy-headed academics like myself that are concerned and sometimes excessively emotionally invested in the distinction between communication and communications as very different terms. The fact is that communication and communications are different, even though the terms get used synonymously. Not just by people out there in the world who ostensibly don't know any better, but by students and even by thousands upon thousands of career professionals who are engaged in work in this very field. But I want to take a couple of minutes to explain to you what the distinction is and why it's actually pretty important. When we're talking about communications, with the S on the end of it, practically speaking, we are talking about something very nuts and bolts, the distribution of messages. Usually when we're discussing communications, what we're interested in are the technology and systems used for sending and receiving messages. So when this term is being used properly, it's a technical term that defines the act of mass communications. Dr. Michelle Mazur, a PhD in communication, who went from an academic career to a career in strategic business communication consulting, describes the distinction between communication and communications really well. When you think about communications, think about a system for transmitting information. Everything from television networks and cable companies to internet network technologies to fiber optic cable systems. As she concludes in her Communication Rebel blog, Mazur says, quote, "Buyer beware. If you're reading an article or considering hiring a coach and you see the extra S, keep looking unless you need your TV or telephone fixed." Okay, so at this point you may be thinking to yourself, or you may be yelling and shaking your fist at the screen, okay, but don't be a pinhead. You know what we mean when we say communications. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that I do. Because often people use the term communications to refer to the tactics used to execute a marketing strategy. For example, advertising, PR, sales promotion, events. And sure, that's what most people who are studying this field and most people who are professional career practitioners in this field might often refer to themselves as communications professionals. However, communications professionals are primarily going to be concerned with just how messages get from point A to point B, the channels of communication. That's where we're talking about things like broadcasting, when we're talking about networks of messages that are either digital or analog in some way, how you actually move messages through the pipeline. Generally, when communications is being referred to in this kind of practical, often business or public communication oriented sense, it's referring to specific messages or groups of messages. Communications, deliberately plural. We put the messages, the communications, out from point A to point B. But that's really selling short what these professions are often about. Often in the fields of advertising, public relations, and related areas in marketing and sales, professionals use the term communications. But what they're talking about is the messages themselves, how many there are, how they get used. Describing the professional work in terms of just managing the messages that get pumped out there ignores the knowledge base and skill set that's necessary for such things as research into figuring out what kinds of messages will resonate with what sorts of target audiences, the collaborative teamwork that's necessary in order to develop strategies and tactics, the creative work involved in putting together resonant messages that have an impact. This work is the product of theory, research, and practice literally spanning over 2,000 years. That's why it's so important to identify and describe this discipline that you're entering into, not as communications, this narrow understanding of the nuts and bolts technical managing of messages from point A to point B, but as communication. The process of generating meaning by sending and receiving symbols and signs that are influenced by multiple contexts. Understanding the field in this way as communication thinks about what we're involved with as a fundamental human enterprise that is broad, internally diverse, and complex. Communication drives how we see the world, how we establish our social connections, our families, friendships, and romantic relationships. Communication is the means by which we collaborate and solve problems in small groups, how we establish organizational systems and cultures. The power of rhetoric and persuasive communication not only drives our commercial economy, but also drives the ways we engage in politics and public advocacy. And communication through the media not only inform and entertain us, but provide the building blocks for our social and cultural understandings. So, when first considering it, the distinction between saying communications and communication seems like a small one, but the difference is actually profound. When we consider communication as an activity that is fundamental to the human condition, the process of generating meaning by sending and receiving symbols and signs that are influenced by multiple contexts, we're not just talking about specific sets of activities that send messages out in a way that advances particular commercial concerns relative to a career. It certainly does that, but it's so much more than that. It's talking about how we as individuals, as relationships, as groups and societies and cultures make sense of the world and act to make a difference within it. That's why, at the end of this little lecture, I hope you're going to proudly say, I'm not a communications major. I'm a communication